In late 2007, I moved to El Cajun, California with my then girlfriend and prospective wife. I lived there for close to half a year, and two incidents in particular stood out. I wasn't able to carry my old Model 10 revolver while living there, and my CCDW permit was reduced to just another form of photo ID. Thanks, Kelly, for making sure non-residents of your state are disarmed. Anyway, I had began carrying a shortened version of the WW2 K-bar fighting/utility knife. I was an ex-militiaman, and I knew how to fight with a knife if I had to. One night, as I made a late-night grocery run, I was forced to put that knowledge to use. I always alternated my routes of return to the apartment complex, just as a way to be familiar with all the ways in and out of the area, if need be. As I left the Save-A-Lot a few blocks away, I had an intense and familiar feeling hit me. I unsnapped the retention strap for easier access to the knife handle. I carried the knife with the sheath tucked into the right jean pocket, its loop secured by my belt. The small folding cart was half full, and although most of the weight was on the bottom, I was able to wheel it behind me with my left hand as I crossed the street and went along one of the paths that would take me back to the apartment complex. It was dark, and few people were out. I was alone because the two people I lived with would be easy prey for any two-legged predators that were known to roam around. My girlfriend was petite, and her father was in advanced age, needing a cane to get around. I actually kind of liked the solo resupply missions at night. As I rounded the block down a narrow alley, my senses were on high alert as always. The first thing I spotted was a few shrubs moving just a few feet in front of me as one person jumped out, followed by another. The two began demanding money, the first producing a cheap knife. I saw a faint glint from the blade and reacted by pulling out the K-bar. I made a reflexive cut to the inside of the first assailant's arm. I felt my blade make contact deep enough to hit bone. The next thing I saw was the second member of the group take off as the first assailant lost his grip on the knife. It clattered to the ground. The person grabbed at his now disabled arm, looking at me in complete shock. I had gone into a combative stance on instinct. The remaining member of the duo turned to see his pal booking it into the opposite direction. I shouted, "Come on, fucker, let's dance!" And he decided to do the same, only running through the shrubs he jumped from earlier. After making sure both were long gone, I scooped up the cheaply made pocket knife and tucked it into my vest pocket. The shakes didn't hit me until I was back inside the apartment. I made sure to check myself over to make sure I was unharmed. I didn't get a scratch. My girlfriend asked what was the matter. I then handed her the closed folding knife and told her an abridged version of what had happened. She rolled me a joint because I was shaking too bad to do so myself. After the THC hit, I began to relax. Both of us laughed about the incident. But to be honest, it was something that I hated having to do. Well, better that bastard than me. This is a story about my mom. She's been living in the same house for around 12 years. It's in a shady neighborhood. Lots of gang activity, and sirens can be heard not far away all the time. I can't count the number of times the convenience store across the street's been robbed since we moved in. But we were never concerned. My mother created an unquestionably comfortable home, and I always felt safe. In 2013, when my father died, she adopted a dog for company, as it was, well, just her living in the house at the time when this incident occurred. The dog is yappy. Sweet as hell, but any sort of noise outside, whether it be a car door slamming or our mailman, she'll bark. And bark. And bark. And bark. This can be scary if it catches you off guard or if it's late at night. But, of course, It's also reassuring that she's so alert. And that's exactly what happened. My mother told me it was late one night, maybe 2 a.m. She was getting ready for bed. She stays up late watching investigative Discovery and the like. There are 2 doors that must be open to get inside the house. The front door has a large window and opens into a porch where she keeps her deep freeze. There's a larger metal door after the porch, which opens directly into the living room of her house. She locks it every night before she goes to bed. She likes to sleep on the couch in the living room. She claims that her bed upstairs hurts her back. Well, all of a sudden her dog started barking its head off. At first my mom scolded her, assuming she heard a car pass by or something. But then my mom heard it too. Someone was knocking on the front door. The doors had muffled the sound of the knock. My mom just sat there, silently contemplating what to do and hoping whoever it was would just go away. But it persisted, as did her dog. Now, my mother wasn't born yesterday. She's a tough old bird and won't take anyone's shit. She opened the metal door and went to the window. Lifting the blinds, she saw a disheveled girl standing on the front step. My mom thought she was maybe drunk, as she was unsteady on her feet and slurred when she spoke. My mom asked her what she wanted. "Is Danielle here?" the woman asked. "No, there's no one here by that name," my mom responded politely as she dropped the blinds and was about to go back into the house. The woman pounded on the door this time, with force. Lots of force, in fact. My mom thought that she'd been kicking it. "Let me in!" she screamed. At this point, my mom is irked. She goes back to the front door, lifts the blinds again, and adamantly tells this woman to fuck off, that there's no one here named Danielle. The woman finally left, but it wasn't until the next day that my mom realized the trouble she could have been in if she opened the door. Her front yard is surrounded by a short metal fence, about waist high. She gives us hell anytime we forget to close the gate, and when she was retrieving the morning paper, she noticed this woman had left the gate open. Annoyed again, she put on her slippers to go outside and close it. And that's when she saw it. Laying on the grass beside our walkway was a crowbar. My mom then understood the force that was being used to pound on our front door. She had no idea the woman had been holding it. The window itself can see a person on the other side from about the chest up, and it had been dark. Who knows what could have happened if my mother had decided to open the door. To preface this, I'm a 35-year-old woman, and I worked at 3 different answering services from age 16 through my mid-20s. I hope this is okay here. It involved me just over 20 years ago. The titty man, bondsman, and sheriff's deputies. Forgive formatting, I'm on mobile. I got my first job at an answering service when I was 16, and I loved it. We answered for about 200 businesses, and there was quite a mix. Same old every day, but different too. I was the baby of the office, and so was usually not alone. And my coworkers protected me from the usual office debauchery, drugs, sex, booze, but somehow forgot to mention the titty man to me, so this came as a bit of a shock that he did what he did. I'd been working there a few weeks and was alone on a Sunday night, answering calls here and there and being bored. The line for a visiting nurse company, home health care, hospice, and rehab, lights up. I answer, to be greeted with a collect call from the local county jail. I accept the call, thinking that someone might have an elderly parent they can't reach and need a welfare check or to schedule some extra visits because they got locked up. Nope. I'm greeted with, "How big's your tits?" I promptly hung up. He called back several times, and I have to accept the call in case it really is for the reasons listed above. I contact the on-call nurse. She tells me what I just told you about, and he does this from time to time. And then I proceed to be harassed for about half an hour, when I get a brilliant idea. Of course, Titty Man calls back, and I accept the call. I tell him I have to put him on hold sometimes so I can answer the phone, but I'll talk to him. He likes this. He starts asking questions, dirty ones, and I answer a few, then put him on hold, grab the other headset, and don it. Here's where law enforcement come into play. I called the bondsman we also answered for and explained my situation. He grabbed his other phone and called his buddy inside the jail, relaying the situation. He's having trouble doing this because he's also listening to me talk dirty to this creep. I was very creative for Titty Man, and he ate it up. My bondsman was laughing so hard, he was in tears. Since Titty Man was calling from inside the overcrowded jail, they couldn't pinpoint him just by being on a phone. Deputies began shutting down banks of phones, one at a time. When the call cut off mid-pervy spew, the officers checked who was on that bank. Lo and behold, there was Titty Man. He was in jail because he was, surprise, making obscene and harassing phone calls. Who'd have thunk it? Deputies took him into custody with new charges, and he got another 18 months or so tacked on to his existing sentence. The idiot was fairly short to the door, too, meaning he was close to release without supervision. My story doesn't end here, however. Several years later, I was working at another answering service, and he calls. Same company and everything. My old service had closed. I informed the on-call nurse. Same one as before, too. And they ended up pressing charges on him again. I encountered this creep in his creepy yet hilarious antics at all three services, for the same company, and different ones as well. It's been 20 years since I first encountered the Titty Man, and no longer do answering service work, but I have a few friends that still do, and the creep is still at it. I hope you get a kick out of my story. A few weeks ago, my boyfriend was running late to work, so instead of dropping me off at my work, he dropped me off at the metro station stop next to his work. There's a stop that's only a few-minute walk from campus, so I wasn't worried about it. As I'm waiting for the train at the stop, a random person thanks me for my service. I'm caught off guard, but realize that I have my military backpack on, complete with my last name stitched on. A man, covered in face tattoos and wearing dirty, smelly clothes, overhears and walks over to me as well. "Oh, you're in the military?" "My wife is too. She's the X position for the Y unit." "Actually, you look really familiar. Were you at the holiday party at the racetrack?" The specifics checked out, but I definitely didn't remember a guy with face tattoos showing up at the event. I tell him that I might know her, but it's a big unit. The train comes, and I walk on to take my seat. "Smith, Amanda Smith, I knew I recognized you." I turn around, and it's Face Tattoo Man. He knows my whole name and decides to sit down next to me on the train. He starts asking me questions about my job and how his wife is doing. He says that she was feeling stressed out with her job and that she was worried she was going to get fired. I thought it was a little weird, considering that she'd been fired over a week prior, but maybe he was trying to be polite and not embarrass her. But then, he started asking some strange questions. Where do we go for off-site training? When do we go? When's the next time I'll train with her? I realized something was really wrong, so I get off at the next stop and try to get away from the guy. He gets off the train, too. "Let's go together. You never answered my questions." I look up from my phone to call someone to get me out of this situation, and I realize I left it in my boyfriend's car. I decide to tell him I got off at the wrong stop and try to get on a different car than him when the next train arrives. Just kidding. He gets off on that car and onto mine at the next stop,
He starts threatening me about giving him information about her. So I stand up and start making a scene, saying that I need help. A man intervenes, and I get off at the next stop, which is actually my stop. I contact that woman, and it turns out that since the holiday party, he'd started doing heroin and became violent toward her. She and the kids moved out to an undisclosed location, and he tried abducting them at least once. He had become homeless, so that explains why I didn't recognize him at all. He did recognize me from the party, and he was trying to figure out when she would be next around. She had a restraining order and no contact against him, so she encouraged me to contact the police if this ever happened again. I decided to not take the train anymore and ditch my backpack altogether. Last week, I'm working late and decided to walk over to the train stop to get some food. As I'm waiting to cross at the crosswalk, I hear, "Amanda? Good to see you." I look behind me, and Face Tattoo Guy is standing right behind me. No. Let's not meet and have dinner together as you try to figure out how to kidnap your wife. I turn and take off sprinting down the busy road to get away. I'm definitely staying away from the whole line. Forever. This is something that happened when I was no more than 8 years old. As a child, I spent a lot of time with my grandma. The reason why I can't really say. Maybe I liked her house and the food better. My grandma had these 2 other women that would come over every weekend, and they would sit, drink wine, and gossip about other people. Next door to her was this middle-aged man that lived with his mother, sister, and 2 brothers. They all lived together, and all of them were odd and mean, except for the middle-aged man. Henry was his name. He was odd, but nice and really quiet. He would come over from time to time on the weekend, and while my grandma and the ladies would sit and talk in the dining room, he would sit on the sofa and watch TV with me. One weekend, the ladies were sitting and sipping their wine as usual, and Henry watching TV with me. One of my grandma's lady friends, I won't put her name here because she's now dead, not due to what I'm telling you in the story, was drunk, rambling about how she can't stand that motherfucker. Grandma and the other friend were telling her to calm down. I wasn't thinking much of it because she was known to drink a little too much and run off with the mouth. She stands up and says, "I can't be around him. Let me go home before I do something." She starts to the door and then turns around and put a cigarette on his head. Henry jumps up, runs past me, grabs the lady and tosses her against the wall. I see picture frames and all kinds of other stuff being smashed over Henry's head, and I'm still trying to figure out what just happened. Henry pulled back from her, and I saw a knife covered in blood. My grandma's friend standing against the wall looking and holding her stomach. My grandma and her friend are screaming at Henry to get out. Right before my grandmother grabbed me and covered my face, I happened to glance at the lady's stomach and see her insides hanging out. I'm sorry for the gruesome details. After that night, I heard nothing else about what happened. I just know I didn't see Henry for years. My parents ended up moving to a new neighborhood a few years later, and our next-door neighbor just happened to be the normal sister of Henry, one that I never met before. And Henry was living with her. He would walk the street every day with a chopped-off wooden brown stick with a nail in the bottom, and whenever I was outside, he would speak and call me by name, like nothing ever happened, like he didn't damn near murder a lady in front of me. Crazy side of this story is, in high school, I ended up dating his niece, one who was born by the normal side of his family. My mom used to work at a coffee shop in Murray, Kentucky, known as the Wag. It was kind of cool. I'd get out of school and I could swing by for a free cup of coffee if Janelle wasn't looking.
I'd usually stay until her shift ended, but that all changed when the vampire kids showed up. At first, I thought they were kind of cool. They dressed in dark clothes and listened to good music. Like most goth kids in the mid-90s, they were drawn to coffee houses and huddled together in the back corner. It was around that time that the rumors started flying around town. I was a freshman in high school, and a few of the vampire kids were seniors. If they showed up to school at all, they stuck together for the most part. My friend Mike told me he'd gone out to the old Salem cemetery with Rod, the leader of the group, to sacrifice a cat or something like that. I figured he was full of shit. But then, several more kids told me that Rod had lured them out to the cemetery. It was hard to tell who was telling the truth and who wasn't, but I do know that I made sure to keep my cat indoors after that. My mother would later tell me that Rod threatened to kill her. I asked why, and she said, "That boy is just troubled." My run-in with Rod came a few days after Mike told me about the cat. I was walking down the trails in the community park when I bumped into Rod and Scott. I turned to walk in the other direction, only for Charity and Dana to emerge from behind some trees. The four of them moved closer to me as a girl up on the hill said, "Not that one. He's too skinny." It was Heather. Rod pulled out a knife and held it in my face, saying, "You're lucky, kid. We're getting thirsty." Then he yelled back, "You sure you don't want to bleed him anyway?" By that point, I'd already pushed past the girls and ran down the trail. They followed, hooting and hollering the whole time. I made it back into town and ran all the way home. I'd tell my mother about it later that night, and she said, "I don't want you going out alone for now." That was my experience with the Murray vampire kids. A week later, they would drive down to Florida and beat an elderly couple to death with a crowbar. A few of them have already been released from prison, but every now and then, someone from back home and I will shudder at the thought of being cornered by a group of would-be murderers. Two nights ago, while walking to my car, an older gentleman named Jeff asked me if I had a cigarette. I politely said no. He continued to talk out aloud to himself whilst walking away, during which time he said, "I've gotten away with murder in Chicago." We get in the car, and 3 blocks later we stop at a light, and he's there, leaning against a pole and smoking a cigarette. I'm fairly certain he's a time traveler. There's no way he could have gotten that far faster than we were in the car. We stopped at the light, and he points directly at me and then does the slicing your throat movement with his thumb. He had a straight but angry face, and we drove away thinking, did that guy just threaten my life because I didn't give him a cigarette? At that point, it was creepy, but kind of funny. Fast forward to last night. 2 friends and I were downtown sitting outside at a brewery talking about what had happened. All of a sudden, the same guy comes walking up to our table out of nowhere. He walks past us, and we get up to go inside, and he makes a U-turn and walks directly past me. We think, okay, that's weird, but there's no way he'd remember me or that he threatened me last night, right? We go to the back and play some foosball. A little over an hour later, we go to leave, and he's still right outside the door waiting for us, looking at himself in the window, pumping himself up like Rocky before a fight. At that point, it really wasn't funny anymore. For the next 30 minutes, we sat there, seeing what he would do, and he just stayed there waiting for us, well, me, to walk out. A few times we thought he'd left, but he'd actually just walked down the street to the entrance of the building my office is at, where he originally saw us. At 11:55 p.m., he finally walked away and we walked to our car. My friend said he was down the street, so we were fine, only to find out that when we got to my car, he was standing right by it. Again, time traveler. We got in the car, and almost immediately a cop car pulled him over. We couldn't make out what they were saying, but it's fairly obvious something is wrong with the man. Either drugs or an extreme mental disability. Regardless, the cops let him go, and he walked away. What started out as a joke or kind of funny scenario ended up being kind of creepy and weird. Medium build, mid-40s, baseball cap on, and walks really fast while muttering to himself. Has anyone seen this guy or encountered him before? I hope he gets help. I'd love to not have to worry about getting killed every time I go downtown. I was around 12 years old when this happened, and I can distinctly remember telling my older cousin at a bus stop that I thought I had heard a large animal growling under our John boat, which sat in our front yard on a ramp with a tarp over it. It wasn't until around 1 p.m. that afternoon, when my mother came to pull me from school, that I learned it was no animal. Turned out, this guy had actually crashed his car while driving under the influence of alcohol and crystal meth just a few miles from our home. He already had a suspended license from previous DUIs and was on probation, so he fled the scene by foot and eventually hid in our yard, where he must have passed out for a while before waking up and seeing our front door open. This was a common practice of my mother's, to let light in while she did chores around the house. She was a stay-at-home mother with my 18-month-old brother, who she had on her hip, when this madman came ripping on our locked screen door and nearly tore it off the hinges. Lucky for her, she'd also been on the phone with her friend, who'd heard the scuffle and called the police. He kept my mom and my brother locked inside our house for almost 3 hours before finally giving himself up to the police. She said he was bleeding from numerous places and smelled and looked like he lived in a sewer. He wasn't a small guy either, weighed at least 250 pounds and was over 6 feet tall. She was so sure he was going to kill them both. He initially tried to demand money and my mom's car keys, but I guess must have realized he wouldn't get far once the police showed up. He was hospitalized briefly for his injuries, but then taken to jail until trial, where my mother's testimony and the evidence recovered from the crash, he was convicted of false imprisonment and a felony DUI. As far as I know, he's still not out. Mom had to replace our screen door as well as our couch and carpet, where he'd left bloodstains and more from soiling himself in the accident. I've never been able to figure out if he was actually growling at me that morning or just having issues breathing. I tend to hope it was the latter. When I was a kid, we used to jump off of the armrests on a couch in my friend's basement. We would mimic moves we saw wrestlers do on TV when they jump off the top ropes. One time, I attempted a move called a swanton, where you do a front flip landing on your back, but you keep your body straight while you do it, and flip at the last second. Well, it didn't go well, and I landed on my face, and my body flipped over my head with my face still on the couch, bending my neck backwards at an obtuse angle. I immediately stood up and couldn't breathe, and felt a sharp pain in my chest and upper back. After a couple seconds, I could inhale but couldn't exhale, and after walking around in circles for a minute, looking like a fish out of water, I slowly regained the ability to breathe properly. As a kid, I would sometimes wonder what the heck happened there, and how I didn't die or paralyze myself, but I'd always just assumed it wasn't as serious as it felt. But the story doesn't end there. From that point on,
Every few years, there would be spread out periods of weeks or months where I'd have a sharp pain in my upper back when I moved certain ways, like if I jumped or made sudden movements. When the pain actually hits, it's so bad that it makes it extremely difficult to breathe or move for a couple seconds, and then it fizzles away until I make another sudden movement. The thing is, it feels exactly the same as the pain I felt when I thought I almost died. Never felt this feeling before that incident. And the first time the pain started wasn't too long after it, and I went to the doctor for it. The doctor, however, didn't seem to know exactly what it was. He just said it was something, I forget what it was called, but it didn't really add up to me completely. But then it just randomly stopped a month or so later, so that was the end of it. The problem comes back every few years and lasts about the same amount of time each time. I never mentioned it again to anyone after the first time, however. After reading up on quantum immortality, sometimes I wonder, did I die there? Did my consciousness transfer to a rare reality where my body was somehow able to recover? And the pains are an after effect of that weird recovery that actually shouldn't have happened? Or maybe the whole thing's a glitch. Obviously, most likely I'm just uneducated on this stuff, and the incident wasn't actually all that serious, and the back pains are something else entirely. But I figured I'd post anyway, since it's definitely weird to me. Context. I have a great/terrible sense of direction. The terrible. For the life of me, I can never remember road names, and barely remember man-made landmarks. You say the place I need to go to is next to the bank, on Street X. I'll be calling you an hour later, saying I'm in the next state over. The great. I can get anywhere if you give me a straight line to follow. And I don't mean follow this road, it's on the left. I mean as the crow flies. I'll use the sun or stars to get to my location, and follow that line straight on to wherever I'm supposed to go. Usually, getting there before the person who gave me directions does. Here's my story. When I was 14 or 15, can't remember which, but I know it was early high school, I missed my bus home. No big deal. I know there are 2 different ways to walk home, depending on how much effort I'm willing to give. Am I willing to give a whole fuck about getting home? Then take a left out of the exit, south-facing, and hoof it up all those hills. Only half a fuck left to give. Well, take a right, spend an extra half-hour walking, but it's all flat sidewalks. Both directions took me several years to figure out before I would stop getting extremely lost, to the point where I almost walked clear to the river, which is in the opposite direction of my house, multiple times. This particular early May day, I don't have a fuck to give. I don't even have half a fuck to give. This is Georgia, a state famous for having summer start in mid-March and be up to the high 80s and 90s with 80% humidity within a week of winter ending. I was a grungy emo kid too, so you can imagine little old me, decked out in black, 2 big clothes, sweltering the second I get out of the building. I'm up at the gate, looking left at the hills and thinking, fuck that. Looking right at the rushing traffic and screaming kids, there was an elementary school less than 100 feet down the road, and thinking fuck that too, when I realize there's a third path I could take. There's a neighborhood entrance right in front of the gate, and I vaguely recognize the name on the big sign as being the same as on the road sign by a little road that led out on the main street my house was on, just a few houses down. I figure, in all my idiot glory, that there's just gotta be a straight line through this neighborhood that'll get me home before the sun boils me right out of my skin. I was wrong. There was no straight line. Following the straightest path, I hit a fence. On the other side, trees. Shitloads of trees. Stretching on into what seemed like forever. Towering and fluffed up to the lowest branches, which were still far over my head, with shrubs and thorn vines and kudzu. I decide to risk it. I hop the fence, blocking my ankle in the process, which hurts worse than you'd think, and immediately try to go back. I can't. There aren't any horizontal boards on this line of the fence. Nothing to climb. I turn, check the sun to get my bearings, and march off in what I'm damn sure is the direction of my house. 2 hours later, which even with having to cross a river is still insane, I've somehow not reached my house yet. I haven't even reached the giant power plant, or whatever those power station things you see on the side of the highway are yet. I can't even hear the road anymore, or kids outside, or sirens in the distance. It's like I wandered my ass into Terabithia or some shit. Except for the low, churning industrial sound I can hear coming from up ahead. You know, the direction my house is supposed to be. I follow the sound. It's all I've got at this point. To find the factory. Or the factory, since I don't really know what it actually was. It's brick, all the way around. Small rectangular windows bordering around the near top, all of which have those metal slat shutter deals in them. 2 giant smokestacks stuck out the top of it like the old mill buildings downtown. There are no doors, at least not at ground level, and the entire thing is surrounded by dirt, trees, scrub, and kudzu, which is also overtaking part of the building's side. No asphalt, no pavement, no parking lot, no feasible way for someone to enter or leave. But still, there's this constant metal whoosh crunch movement sound emanating from the building, sort of like a cross between a running industrial dishwasher and a garbage disposal. The sun's been getting lower, so there's enough shade to tell there are lights on inside, reflecting off the metal shutter things. I get close enough to almost touch it, because I was consumed with this idea that, as long as I can touch it, it has to be real. When my ADHD ass notices, out of the corner of my eye, the very tippy tops of that power station I mentioned earlier. I hoofed it to the power station, made it to the main road, and eventually back to my house. How it gets weirder. It's been almost a decade since then. I'm 22 now, and this past spring break, which, due to my geographic location in Georgia, happens about a week later than everywhere else, I decided I want to go find that building again. I tell my roommates, I'm not friendly with them, it's just a so we can pay rent deal, that I'll be gone for the week, staying with my friends. I tell my friends whereabouts I'll be in case I don't check in one day and they need to tell the cops where to find my body. I pack what would have been enough supplies for a week. Remember, I'm not good with remembering man-made landmarks. It took me over a day to find my old high school, and set off. I finally get to the same woods. Got lost in South Carolina for 15 hours. Not fun. And to that same fence I hopped, at around the same time as back in high school, and jumped it. So, it's Sunday, which is important. Day 2 of full spring break, when I jump the fence. I get a bit sentimental about being in these woods again because they're really beautiful and the sunlight filters down with a pleasant, cool breeze. Also important. There are frogs jumping and croaking, birds chittering. A squirrel pooped on me. It was like camping, except I was an idiot. I had a pair of broken sandals, a backpack full of beef jerky and Lunchables, 2 packs of smokes, my phone, an old-fashioned film camera, spin the wheel, take the picture, wait several weeks for a CVS to develop it, because I wanted pictures, goddammit. And I'm wearing holey jeans, a wife beater, and a massive hunting jacket tied around my waist, just in case. but I get overwhelmed by how nice it is outside that I camp for the night, mostly by climbing up the least ant-filled tree and wrapping up in my jacket and marking my location mentally so I can start the search in earnest in the morning. Except I am a dumbass. This is Georgia, in April. There's only one reason why the humidity would be that low with a cool, strong breeze. That reason is, April is the start of storm season, which in this specific part of Georgia is also tornado season. Monday morning. The day starts out fine. I start my trek and enjoy the weather not being hotter than the inside of Satan's ass crack, and I'm making good headway. Then the wind picks up. Then the sky goes dark. Then the rain starts, pelting down freezing, thick and grimy with city water. You know how the water cycle works, I'm not going to explain it. Then, just as I hear that distinctive, never heard it anywhere else, metal whoosh crunch movement sound, just up ahead over a moderately sized hill, it happens. Over in the distance, muffled by trees or other nature whatnot, I hear a fucking siren go off. Not police, ambulance, nor fire truck. Nope. It's the goddamn emergency weather siren. But I'm an idiot. We've established this. So I press on, because I'm pretty sure I can make it over the hill and get a picture of this place before the twister comes down and drags me off to Oz. I get so fucking close to getting over the hill when the wind turns nasty, and so strong it whips my 119-pound ass back down the hill, feeling like I've just taken a dragon kick to the face and chest. I try, one more time, 'cause I want this stupid picture, alright? I've already been lost in the fucking Palmetto State, left the city twice, and got a beetle bite on my ass. I'm so pissed off, and I'm willing to get this picture, or, as it's turning out to be very literal, die trying. That's when a minor flood comes bursting over the hill. I gave up. Hauled ass off to where I hoped the power station was. I was almost right. I ended up down the street from it, which makes even less sense, but I was trying not to get hit by, I can only assume, low-flying sheds at that point, and ran to my parents' place. Now that I'm less of an idiot, hopefully, and no longer running off the mental exhaustion caused by having 6 midterms in 3 days just before break, I'm tempted to go back and look for it. Just tempted, mind you. I looked up the city records for buildings, both commercial and residential, and nothing's listed for that area other than the power station. I've biked up and down the surrounding roads looking for signs, looking for driveways to anything that could be connected to it. The place sounds like the dam building by the river with its machine noise, but it's smack dab in the middle of the woods. So, I'm out of answers. If you made it this far, I hope you'll follow me on Twitter at KingSpook Creepy.